following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TFA coming to you with a video of a Transformers action figure that is somewhat special to me because technically when I got this figure at the start of the year, this became the first Transformers Legacy Evolution figure that I added to my Transformers collection, and it is the Transformers Legacy Evolution Generation Selects Deluxe Class Magnificus. So for those of you who don't know who is Magnificus, he is basically a Decepticon who is mold mates with Transformers Generation 1 Perceptor. Now, technically, Perceptor's original Transformers Generation 1 action figure was released in Takara Tomi's Microchange line, which consisted of robots that transformed into handheld objects, but because Magnificus is one of the only repaints of a figure from the Microchange line, a lot of Transformers fans and collectors over the years have incorrectly said that Magnificus is the Diaclone version of Perceptor, so there's just a common misconception due to Perceptor being from the Microchange line, but even though it's technically incorrect, that's basically who Magnificus is, and that's probably how I'd going to end up referring to him and throughout the rest of the video, is he is basically the black Decepticon version of Perceptor. And the reason why a lot of collectors incorrectly lump Magnificus with the Diaclone Transformers characters is because he's technically one of only, as far as I'm aware of, this era of only two Decepticon Diaclone characters whose mold mates with an Autobot. The other is the Diaclone version of Wheeljack, who was turned into the Decepticon character of Exhaust. So Magnificus is somewhat special in that regard. I think Magnificus, I believe he holds the title of unofficially being the first Legacy Evolution Transformers figure to be released, even though he was released as an online exclusive in the Generation Selects line. But yes, I'm really thrilled to have him here. There's not much else to say about Magnificus. His name, Magnificus, for years I thought it was a play on the word magnificent and that he was supposed to be a magnificent Decepticon, but after I got this figure and I browsed around his bio on the Transformers Wikipedia, apparently Magnificus has always been ridiculed, bullied, shunned, and constantly put down by all the other Decepticons, so he's one of the least reliable and the most verbally abused Decepticons of the Transformers franchise, so his name is actually a play on the word magnifying, due to the fact that most microscopes which Perceptor and Magnificus transform into use magnifying lenses to help scientists get a close-up of the microscopic world, for lack of better grammar. So yeah, it's kind of funny that I thought his name was supposed to be a play on the word magnificent, but it's actually a play on the word magnifying lens. So yeah, there's a idea of that. One thing to note about Magnificus, you can kind of see it here on his box. He does come with a different head sculpt from Perceptor. This is the Studio Series 86 Deluxe Class Perceptor figure. This is the most recent Generation 1 uninspired action figure of Perceptor. Perceptor is one of a few Transformers figures in the Studio Series 86 line who was released in both a closed window packaging and then an open window packaging. And so he was one of the figures that made the transition from closed windows to open windows, and having, as Hasbro and Takara Tomy are advertising here on Magnificus's box, having plastic-free packaging. So the only part of plastic you get is the Transformers action figure itself. And that's pretty much all there is to say about Magnificus. Another reason why this figure is special, even while he's still inside the box, is that this has become the first and only action figure of Magnificus in my Transformers collection, and I believe it's one of only 3 action figures of Magnificus that exist. The first is of course the Generation 1 Magnificus action figure, which I believe it was released for the first time back in either 2004 or 2005 when Takara Tomy decided to make the black Microchange / Diaclone version of Perceptor into this character, and it was released as a Takara Tomy exclusive through eHobby Shop. And then the second version was a repaint of the 2011 Reveal the Shield Perceptor action figure. That version of Magnificus, I believe it came out either the same year in 2011 or it might have come out in 2012. I believe that also was released through an eHobby Shop exclusive in Takara Tomi's Transformers United line. And so this is the one. This is only the third action figure of this character to be released, so it's somewhat special in that regard. So without further delay, let's get Magnificus out of his box and take a close look at him in his robot mode. Alright, so this is old news by now. When I'm recording this video, it's March of 2023. We're halfway through the month. But here's what the plastic repackaging looks like for the Transformers Generation Selects action figures. So you can see Magnificus's new head sculpt, his chest, and his knee pads and his feet inside there. So it should hopefully make removing him from the box easier than it was in the past, but I can see there's a little bit more to it than what I originally thought. There's some tape holding him down, so if you excuse me, I will be right back. Alright, and so here's Magnificus out of his box. He's a nice all-black version of Perceptor. He's got two Decepticon logos. He's got one here on his robot mode abdomen, and then he's got one here on the microscope lens. Moving the lens out of the way for a second, here's a close-up of his face sculpt, and it's the same face sculpt that the Generation 1 Perceptor action figure had. Perceptor actually came with a Optimus Prime looking mouth plate, and it was Sunbow Productions for when designing Perceptor's animation model that decided the faceplate looked a little bland on him, and so they gave him an actual dedicated a full face with an actual nose and mouth. Also, there they are side by side with each other. So technically, if you wanted to have Studio Series A6 Perceptor have a G1 action figure accurate inspired head, then you can go out and buy duplicate copies of Perceptor and Magnificus and do a head swap between them if you want. To have Perceptor with the mouth plate face. I believe the parts of them that are black, yeah, it's a darker shade of black plastic that's used on Perceptor. Perceptor, it's actually a very it's actually charcoal gray. Perceptor's robot mode head, and the other parts of him that are supposed to be black, it's charcoal gray on Perceptor, whereas on Magnificus, it's actually a shade of black plastic. It's not solid black, but it's a it's not like the black plastic that's used on a handful of other Transformers figures that have been released recently, but it's dark. It's definitely a darker shade of black than what's on Perceptor. So if you already have Studio Series A6 Perceptor, then with Magnificus, basically what you see is what you get. Pretty much the only thing Magnificus has to distinguish himself from Perceptor is his new head sculpt, and the fact that all the parts on Perceptor that are red are now black here on Magnificus. And then what are some of the other paint differences? The parts on Perceptor that are this light blue, they're now silvery gray on Magnificus. And just like Generation 1 Perceptor, the parts of Perceptor that are painted this very light, dull gray, like his robot mode chest, his abdomen, the front of the microscope lens, and then all three of his dials. They're the same, it's the exact same shade of light gray, those parts in Perceptor. It's the same shade of light gray paint found on Magnificus, and that's because on the original Generation 1 / Microchange figure, those parts were actually made out of silver chrome. I kind of wish Hasbro and Takara Tomy would have, just to further distinguish Magnificus from Perceptor, if they would have made those parts on him in a much more, like a solid metallic silver rather than the dull gray that's used here on Perceptor. Granted, if you hold it up to a bright enough light, like the light on the ceiling of my room is showing, this light gray paint can be somewhat reflective if you shine a bright enough light on it and you can get it in front of a camera at a nice angle where it looks like it's shining back at you, but it's just an optical illusion, and it's nothing like the shine found on silvery chrome. But yeah, there's Magnificus and Perceptor side by side with each other. There's a close-up of his new head sculpt one last time. I really enjoy the style of mouth plate that's used on this action figure. So I won't go too much into the articulation since I covered it with Perceptor's review, but Magnificus, since the head sculpt's the only retooled part, the same articulation as Perceptor, ball joint at the head, swivel joint, ball joints at the shoulders, so arms can go forward and backward 360 degrees. You can swivel at the bicep 180 degrees clockwise and counterclockwise, 90-degree bend at the elbow. The hands can move in and out at the wrists, but it's mainly due to transformation. Waist swivel, so you can do 360 degrees ease left and right. Universal joint points at the hip, so legs can go back this far, go forward that far. They can go out only that far, or at the thigh, at the hip. Swivel joint in the thigh, a hinge knee, and you do technically have ankle rockers, but fresh out of the box, it's really tight on Magnificus, so I'm not going to try and, I was forced it too much, but I was doing it the wrong spot, because you got the shield piece right here on the side of the foot, so you can get this figure into a wide-legged pose if you want. Just like Perceptor, this swivel joint right here, halfway up the upper leg on the thigh, which you'd use to transform this figure into I believe it's either tank mode or microscope mode, I can't remember which one, but that transformation joint there is as loose on Magnificus as it is on Perceptor. So that's pretty much all there is to say. I really enjoy how Magnificus looks. He's a nice all-black repaint of Perceptor. And one nice thing that Magnificus has over Perceptor is that the hollowed gap that ended up on the back of this figure's torso, at least at a distance with Magnificus, since he's all black, he can kind of create an optical illusion that it's not as noticeable a gap as it is on Perceptor. So that's one nice thing he has over. That's one feature that Magnificus has Perceptor beat over. So without further delay, let's get these guys into microscope mode. Alright, and so here is Magnificus transformed into microscope mode. I love the fact that it's almost identical to the Generation 1 action figure. That said, the new deluxe figure here is only half the size of the Generation 1 figure. Generation 1 Perceptor was not quite the size of a modern Voyager class figure. He was in between a modern Voyager and a modern deluxe. But a Voyager class size would have been a slightly better use for Perceptor, I believe. But regardless of that, I do enjoy how Magnificus came out. In real life, red microscopes, as far as I'm aware of, I don't think there's any places with microscopes that actually have ones that are painted red. When I was in high school, the microscopes we used were one of three colors. They were either white, gray, or black, and so, being mostly black, Magnificus has Perceptor beat in regards to the fact that being a mostly black microscope, Magnificus is successfully more of a robot in disguise than Perceptor is, and that's one of the reasons why Hasbro changed up Perceptor's paint job from the one that the figure originally had in the Microchange line. Takara Tomy wanted to try and make the Microchange robot to microscope action figure be as realistic looking as possible by doing it almost entirely in black paint, but when Hasbro decided to use this figure as an Autobot, they figured swapping out the black for red would make the figure look more friendly and heroic. And considering the fact that Magnificus is a Decepticon, I think it works for him having this type of paint job. But regardless of that, technically Perceptor, even though he's red, he is somewhat of a robot in disguise over Magnificus due to his Autobot logo being a white outlined Autobot logo there on the inside of his robot mode chest, whereas Magnificus has it on the magnifying lens of the microscope. So Perceptor's technically more of a robot in disguise in microscope mode than Magnificus in regards to Magnificus having his Decepticon logo on the microscope lens, where Perceptor has one that, depending on how you angle the microscope lens, the Autobot logo can be somewhat hidden. So they balance each other. They're evenly matched as far as being robots in disguise in microscope mode. One thing I will say is that in microscope mode, there really isn't any place to put the laser guns. The instructions tell you on both Perceptor and Magnificus to use one of the 5mm pegs here on the robot mode shoulder and have the laser gun sticking off to the side, but sticking it here to the side of the microscope lens, which is where you're supposed to put it when you transform these guys into tank mode. I think it works out here because it looks like a additional part for the microscope. It doesn't really distract it too much. One thing you can't do is do it just like on Perceptor. You can position the microscope lens if you want by angling it at different angles, and you can adjust the tray ever so slightly out. You can't technically there is a clear plastic lens here inside the microscope that you can see through to the other side, but it's not really designed, but it's just a piece of plastic lens and it doesn't really actually magnify anything, and if you look through it you just see a blurry image of what's on the other side of it, so I do not recommend looking down the lens unless you want to get a major headache. And yes, really impressive microscope mode. To get to tank mode you can do it in just a few steps. So I will do what I normally don't do and actually show a transformation step on my video, but to get this figure from microscope mode to tank mode, you just rotate the base of the microscope right here and then flip it around 180 degrees, and these become the treads for the tank mode. And then you straighten out the microscope lens so it's parallel with the tank treads. It's trying to adjust the back here. Here the tank mode, and that's it. That is Magnificus in his tank mode. So the these original figures of the original Microchange figures of Perceptor and Magnificus, they were some of the few figures that were an example of how despite being separate lines of transforming robot figures, Takara Tomy did design the Microchange line of figures to somewhat interact with the figures that were released in the Diaclone line, and that's because the tank mode for this figure, even though it doesn't look a thing like an actual tank, it's a science fictional tank made up from the minds of the designers at Takara Tomy back in 1980. It was either 83 or 84 when this figure was originally designed, but on the original figure there were ports here, and the type of action figure that was supposed to act as the driver for these tanks were the tiny drivers that came with the Diaclone robot action figures. So, one could easily argue with that interaction that I said at the start of the video that it would be incorrect to call Magnificus a Diaclone figure, but because of that interaction with the Diaclone drivers, I take back what I said, and technically these figures can be viewed as Diaclone figures due to that interaction of the Diaclone drivers being the ones that are supposed to operate the tank modes for Perceptor and Magnificus. But yeah, it's a bit of a stretch of the imagination of this being a tank with the tank treads sculpted here on the side. In more recent years, with the rise in popularity of Cybertronian alt modes, a lot of Transformers fans and collectors have retroactively declared that the tank is Perceptor Cybertronian alt mode, and also likewise Magnificus, and that this was the only mode Perceptor could transform into before he came to planet Earth, and the microscope was a second vehicle mode that Perceptor took on when he arrived on planet Earth. So I've always enjoyed that idea that this was originally a Perceptor Cybertronian alt mode, and that it was the only mode he possessed, and that when he came to planet Earth, Perceptor ended up turning himself into a triple changer by taking on the microscope mode while retaining all the parts that allowed him to still transform into his Cybertronian tank mode. But yes, I really enjoy seeing Perceptor and Magnificus facing off against each other. As far as I'm aware of, apart from some biographic information that Takara Tomy put out for Magnificus, I think he might have appeared in one or two issues of the comic books that were released by IDW, but apart from a sparse few comic book appearances, Magnificus hasn't really made any appearance in any major Transformers media, and in that regard, Magnificus remains one of the more obscure Transformers characters, even by the standards of the Diaclone own Transformers characters. He's one of the more obscure ones, and whether or not Magnificus will become a popular Transformers character one day is uncertain at this point. as far as the popularity of Transformers action figures go and characters go, for Perceptor, he's not one of the most popular characters. He's not up there with Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, but at least he's not at the bottom of the list and being one of the least known Transformers characters. He's somewhere around the middle as far as the popularity spectrum of Autobot Transformers characters go. So whether or not Magnificus will finally crawl out of the rut and be a recognized Transformers character is uncertain, and that's the joke with Magnificus, is that nobody recognizes him as anything great within Transformers fiction. So whether or not Magnificus will ever have a time to shine is uncertain of. I will just wrap up the review by saying I really enjoy the color scheme used here on him. One thing to note about this red head here for Magnificus's chest, the robot mode chest, it is all red paint, and they did it for the sake of mimicking the fact that on his Diaclone figure, the lens, I believe, did have red plastic behind it. But overall, I pretty much have nothing negative to say about Magnificus. Yes, I enjoy seeing here besides Perceptor. So to wrap up the review for the proverbial question, do I recommend getting the Transformers Legacy Evolution Generation Selects Deluxe Class Magnificus action figure? Absolutely I do. Do I still recommend getting Magnificus even if you already have Studio Series A6 Perceptor in your collection? Definitely. You cannot go wrong having Magnificus in your Transformers collection. Again, even though he's one of the more obscure Transformers characters, and there's literally only like 3 action figures of him, counting this one, that exist, it's for that reason of how few action figures he has and how rare of a character that he is that I recommend you get Magnificus and add him to your Transformers collection. You can't go wrong with Magnificus boosting your army of Decepticons. And so thank you guys all so much. This has been the TFN Geek. Thank you guys all for your continued support, or thank you to all my subscribers. And until next time, you guys stay safe, stay healthy, transform and roll out. Goodbye, everyone.